Welcome to Spark Science. I'm Ramon Barber DeGraaff. Today we're going to talk about science, pseudoscience, and society, and I'm here with many guests and a new co-host. I am here with Kyle Mullins, and he is a cultural anthropology student. You are going to graduate, right?
Yeah, I'm supposed to graduate this term.
Awesome. Supposed to? You are going to graduate.
Yes.
Okay. And we are here with his advisor, Dr. Sean Bruna. And you have been on our show before. You are in, I forgot, I think it was called the Anthropology Files. That's the show we did.
Yeah.
So you can check it out. Go to Spark Science now, check that out. And my co-host for today, to stick with tradition, is another family member. For our listeners and viewers, you remember my other co-hosts have been my sister, my brother, and now my father, Ramon Barber Jr.
Hello, everybody.
Yep, and he is also a anthropology student.
I'll be a senior, graduating in the spring.
Yes, at San Diego State.
Yes, undergrad, and hopefully being accepted to the master's program.
Right, so it's awesome. We'll talk about the whole background thing soon. So,
okay.
Yeah, okay. So today, I mean, the title we all kind of agreed on was Science, Pseudoscience, and Society, because you all have some background in anthropology from varying levels. And I wanted to start out with disaster movies. And I know we usually do our shows and the last thing we talk about is pop culture, but this episode, we're just going to kind of weave it through the whole episode.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So first of all, there's a new Mummy movie that's out.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise,
Oh,
yes.
no.
And I want to talk about the Mummy movie, and I want to talk about like all that stuff. But before we do that, was pop culture or any of like kind of disaster movies or any kind of movie about anthropology or sociology, did any of that get you into anthropology? Who wants to go first?
I hate to admit it, but Indiana Jones got me into anthropology.
And we talked about this.
That's just horrible. We talked about it previously.
Episode, yeah.
But I love disaster movies also because
Right.
you see society completely get destroyed, but you also see the way humanity's supposed to act and everyone rises up and accomplishes something.
rebuild.
So,
Sometimes
somehow,
that happens.
Well, somehow, but in the process you learn about humanity. So I have to say that I love movies about disaster and society, and they definitely got me engaged in anthropology.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I was a pretty big follower of the zombie apocalypse fad. So like, you know, The Walking Dead and similar things.
Is that fad over now?
It's cooling down quite a bit. But so the zombie fad is what really got me into it because it not only were the zombies involved and that was the cool thing at the time, but they also had really robust commentaries on the human condition.
Right.
So, and the more and more I noticed those, the more and more I also started pursuing anthropological thought in a way. So,
And with me, those movies and those genres were very entertaining, but that really didn't get me into anthropology. For me, I go back, obviously, way back farther than these two and my daughter, and roots was the thing that got me involved. So I was big into genealogy. And with me, genealogy just formed and morphed into a time machine. You go back into time. So for me, it was a window going back into time and still being into this place.
Well, as I think of a lot of these movies, they're, especially whether they're disaster movies or movies that incorporate genealogies, they also teach us how we should act amongst generations and the different roles. I was thinking of one that is not usually thought of as a movie about genealogy or kinship. I was thinking about The Birds the other day, a different type of disaster movie. I saw a huge flock of birds outside, and I went back to The Birds, and that's a movie about different, perhaps one interpretation, different mother roles. And who is actually part of your family. At the end of that movie, there's a new character that joins part of a family. And I think, you know, whether it's...
I do not remember that movie at all.
Oh,
Can you give me some of the
We'll
background?
have to, well, you have...
Just extreme fear.
Pretty much, you have a lot of birds that are in an area, and then you have one individual that has a car outside, a male. You have another individual that might be female, another individual, and individuals they're trying to get away, essentially. But
but it
people
also has to
act
do with
in
mothers.
different ways. Well, people act in different ways, and one interpretation of that movie, perhaps, is that we learn different ways that individuals that may or may not be part of your family might act, and they come in and play different roles. And I think of that movie, and I think it's a disaster movie where we learned about our history, our family, our genealogies. in a way that's very subtle. Versus, say, Roots, which is kind of a much more overt, where we learn about those histories. But they're always,
I did
they're all
not make
entertaining.
any of those relations with birds. So
I saw it as how, at the time in the 50s, how different ways that an individual should act in sort of a mothering role.
Yeah,
And I saw one character go through various different roles.
and like
of-
protect people from these birds.
and whether absolutely,
Yeah.
whether other individuals would acknowledge that sort of
interesting.
acting or not, and bring someone into a family.
Right, or just like be like, whatever, I'm gonna run. Like,
Or I'm out of here. You're not part of my family. You're not part of my adopted family that I'm bringing in. I'm out of here on my own. Sure.
which is great because I mean, you said this idea of these generational things. I have like multiple generations here. I'm much older than Kyle. He's a student. We have these different generations, but also I love that you were talking about these different disaster movies. That's a theme in all of them. This idea of like, who is part of my family? Who will I protect? Who will I help in this disaster, and who will I not help? Right?
Absolutely. There's different people that come in, and they all play a role in zombie movies. Inevitably, there are people that have been isolated that come together, and they have to decide, are we going to help each other out? Now we're a new family. 28 days later, the end of the movie is all about, the entire movie is about a family coming together of individuals that don't know each other. And you know, they survive in that case, at least for the short term. But I look at movies. I don't know. I don't know if you go through this or if you go through this. But when I watch movies now, I'm almost ruined in a sense, because I'm looking at them at different levels, and it takes almost effort for me to step away and disappear into the story that's being told.
Right, and that's one of the things that I'll definitely do, especially with newer movies. Is I want to go into it for like at least the first time around, maybe even the second time around. Like, I just want to go into this movie and enjoy it for what it is, and I have to keep that in mind constantly throughout the movie. Where like I'll occasionally cook up a commentary. Like, I don't know if any of you have seen Wonder Woman.
No, I haven't.
But Wonder Woman is a great movie. I recommend it. But throughout the whole thing, I kept trying to cook up various commentaries and like trying to spot out what commentaries that the directors were issuing. And it's just like, wait, no. I just have to pause myself and say that I'm going to enjoy this movie. And like, movies are supposed to be entertaining, and I want to be entertained instead of, you know, engaging in whatever discourse that it may have to offer right now.
So I have a definitional kind of question. This idea of anthropology versus sociology. And as a scientist that's not anywhere educated in this world, I took 2 anthropology classes. And I took 0 sociological classes or sociology classes. What is that distinction in academia? Like, what is the science between those two things?
I'll let one of you all take it if you want.
Well,
Yeah, Dad.
for me, it's a very fine line, because you have anthropology where you want to go ahead and get into the minds of the people that you're studying and see how they lived, how they survived, how they organized in a society, if it was tribal, if it was a higher level into more complex, a city-state. Sociology, it seems to be kind of slightly on the other side of that line, to where it's what they thought and what they believed in. So to me, it's very fine to where you go back and forth between the anthropology and the sociology. And a lot of times, sociology can be dealt with more modern times for the people of today, where anthropology would be dealing more into the people of the past.
But isn't that very just Western-centric? I mean, like, when I was growing up, it just seemed to me like there was this distinction between sociology and anthropology. Was like, anthropology is those people, and sociology is us. And like, that seemed very just like Western-centric. And it seemed like when you say modern, and I actually even said that when I was talking to Sean, and I was like, but modern doesn't just mean white Western society. It means like everybody, and even
Present day.
Yeah, well, yeah, and there's people that study different cultures that are happening right now, right? And that's still anthropology, but somehow I was very confused about this distinction. So what would you say as the professor? Or Kyle, yeah.
As a professor.
Yeah.
I'll pass it on to one of the
Yeah.
as a student.
Yeah.
Why not?
Are you just
I find
testing
it-
him? No.
I find it interesting that we brought that up because like it fits really well into what I've been doing as a student here because I've done a lot of commentary on Orientalist perspectives, and you know like the typical Orientalist perspective
That just
is
sounds awful,
that,
though, to me
you
as
know,
an Asian person.
like,
That just sounds
it-
awful.
Yeah, it totally is. And so, you know, it's us as a Western culture looking at really any other culture and being like, oh, those poor unadvanced people, we should
Right.
assist them in some way.
Right.
When
gotta save 'em.
You know, exactly.
Educate them.
Yeah.
Yeah, saving, educating,
Enlighten them.
enlightening,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. And I've done a whole bunch of stuff regarding Orientalist perspectives in various classes that I've taken here. And so like I think a lot of things that are common both in sociology and anthropology
Yeah.
are especially in the earlier stages of them as viable courses of study.
Like when we went on expeditions and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know like
Not
the
me personally, but
the whole way back in the day, that
Yeah.
was kind of what it was, you
Right.
know, and since then it's been moving away from that in a more healthy perspective.
yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that I believe separates sociology from anthropology is like anthropology really delves into a broader aspect of an entire people's, whereas like sociology can tend to be a little more focused onto like individual social groupings and not necessarily the entire culture as a whole.
Okay.
Well said. I'd add one thing perhaps to that.
Yeah.
I'd say that also the methods perhaps that anthropologists use are a little
Yes,
different.
let's get into the science. Now I understand.
Well, sociology may look, I mean, both of us as disciplined sociologists and anthropologists look at practices throughout history, both contemporary, in our own backyards, further away, and throughout time. I think the methods that anthropologists use might be a little bit different, mainly participant observation. That's really one of the core aspects of anthropology, particularly cultural anthropology or medical anthropology, where on one end we can use data that someone else has collected, maybe it's come from surveys, maybe it's come from observational data. Anthropologists might say that in order to come to a closer understanding of what's happening amongst a particular group of people, as you point out, that we will actually go and participate in ways that are appropriate.
Okay, so
So we actually go out to communities. In my case, I partner up with community members for research projects and actually engage in practices there. And I think that is one of the main differences between anthropology, at least cultural anthropology, and sociology.
that totally makes complete sense to me now. Because as you're saying, I mean, as a scientist, we in our fields try to be completely objective, which we know as humans is impossible. But I mean, you're trying your best to be not part of your subject matter, not part of your data set. And you're saying that in sociology, that's kind of where they're trying to do this. But in cultural anthropology, you're embedding yourself, and you're a participant, like you were saying.
Yeah, we
Okay.
really, as anthropologists, we can only analyze the world through our eyes, and we try and understand how other individuals might understand the world. But it's ultimately shaped by who we are.
Yeah.
So the way that I understand the world as a male, as a Latino, as an immigrant, is certainly going to be different from the ways that other individuals understand the world. But hopefully through our training as anthropologists, we get better and better at understanding different perspectives, perhaps comparing them and coming to new understandings. Whether or not we can ever do that is a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we ever can, but perhaps when we partner with different groups of people for research, we can come to a closer understanding of how we view the world.
Yeah, that. I wanted to ask my dad that actually.
And I truly believe, and where Kyle was going before was that participating in the past, that is where anthropologists have to throw away their old bones of colonialism, to where you are interacting, but you are more or less trying to modify their society into yours.
Yeah, being aware to not do that.
Exactly. And more or less putting the geek viewpoint now is that Star Trek, the prime directive.
Right.
You do not interact. You are observer. And that, in essence, what I think is the modern day anthropologist should be doing, to where they observe, try to understand, delve into their language so you can interact with them and communicate with them. You try to reach out into their religious beliefs, their political structure, but at the same time, you're not going to try to modify it or change it, because that would be preventing you to try to understand it.
Right. But that's horribly difficult. I mean, the prime directive is broken like every other.
Exactly.
This is a great question, though, in anthropology. I mean, by researching, by being anywhere and just engaging in the world, we're changing it.
Exactly.
And anthropologists clearly are aware of our history and that colonialist history, which survives in some forms throughout today. We see in some research that's conducted. What's interesting, perhaps, is that my work is very applied. I do try and change the world in some ways.
Yeah.
So,
You don't do the prime directive.
I'm a diabetes researcher, for example, and diabetes is its own disaster movie taking place throughout the U.S. right now in all sorts of communities.
All over the world.
And all over the world. And I research practices and try and understand with communities why diabetes might take hold to present data that then communities can use to perhaps change a direction. So I sometimes stay up at night wondering, by doing this, will I, 50 years, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, be seen within that community as somehow causing some harm that I didn't foresee? Or should I have been more of the Star Trek anthropologist who was just documenting?
Yeah.
And that's a difficult question. And every time I watch Star Trek, that comes up. I think of my research methods.
Do you really?
Should I have that objective of just documenting, or are there instances where data should be presented, possibly to create change? Maybe it just says I become confused in the field with everything happening, but it's true. As researchers, I think we have these different perspectives that we try and deal with. That's a great interpretation for sure.
Same with the fine line between an anthropologist and an archaeologist, where you're discovering, uncovering, but they both have different paths that they take in their study.
I like this idea of the difference between archaeology and anthropology.
And cultural anthropology.
And cultural anthropology.
Both are within anthropology, but we might say cultural anthropology and archaeology.
So let's answer that question before we take our break. And you had said Indiana Jones, right? And he just runs in and just takes things from cultures, and he like doesn't talk to them at all. You know, so
It's pretty terrible.
Belongs in a museum. I don't
Right.
care who
That
you are.
catchphrase, "it belongs in a museum," is that just like, oh, everyone groans, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about archaeology and cultural anthropology. What's the difference between? Give us good definitions of those, and I'll let Kyle and Sean take this away.
Well, archaeology and cultural anthropology are two of the what I like to call four pillars, or the main courses of study in anthropology. The other two are, of course, linguistic anthropology and bioanthropology. But the main defining line between cultural and archaeology, I believe, is one is obviously the groundbreaking aspect, and just the overall methods that you would use in archaeology versus cultural anthropology. Because you obviously can't do participant observation for an anthropological study.
Right. Because they're not there anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You're breaking ground, and you're finding potentially relics in the different levels of the strata. Whereas, with cultural anthropology, you are dealing a lot more often with social strata, not physical strata of any sort.
Way to answer that beautifully. That's, I think,
You're very
a
proud
great
of your
way to.
student.
It's nice when you can sit back and just let other folks take care of everything. I'm all for it.
Well, let's take a break, and then we're going to come back and really going to just dive into these disaster movies like The Mummy, and we're going to dive into 2012, and we're going to talk about
Finally
society.
get real.
Yeah, we're going to get real. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about 2012. Welcome back to Spark Science. We're talking science, pseudoscience, and society, and we are going to just get into talking about disaster movies and how society behaves in those disaster movies.
The juicy part.
The juicy part. So we kind of alluded to The Mummy, 2012. So what do we want to tackle first?
Well, I'll talk about how I see movies, and you talked a little bit about this, of how, the ways we go in and watch movies maybe as anthropologists, and sometimes we struggle between enjoying the movie and then analyzing it.
Yeah.
I'll just say I view movies, and I'm watching for characters and that tell us how we're supposed to act in society. I look for how certain norms are reinforced. So when I watch something, I see a character that's teaching me a lesson as a way of acting or not acting. I see myths that maybe I can act out later on as a costume for Halloween, or maybe as I'm eating my cereal, my cereal, I'm reliving Star Wars as I look at the cereal box with Star Wars characters on it. I see how movies sort of tell me as an individual out in society how I should live.
And what do they trigger too, right?
And sometimes it's, I learned something perhaps I'm doing wrong or I should be doing differently. Unless perhaps it's an independent film which might be purposefully showing me something different, in which case it comes all back again and I have the same experience. So I view movies, disaster movies in particular, from that lens right there.
Can I add to that and this idea of when you're looking at the characters, I spend way too much time and I think too much brain power on who does the director, who does the movie maker want me to like? Who do they want me to not like? And what does that say about our society, that this is the trope in which we can identify, like every man is a white man, right? Like we can all identify with him, but if it's somebody else, we can't really identify with him, right? Like who is it that's, we're supposed to kind of root for, and who is it that we're supposed to like boo,
The way I see a lot of disaster movies is about reinforcing and developing and reinforcing different types of characters. And that each have their own narratives in a situation, and that we identify with them and say, would I be that person? Would I be this person? What would I do in this scenario? And there could be the most outrageous idea, like The Core is an absolutely outrageous idea. But there are different characters that are acting in a certain way, and we identify with those. And we say, you know what, here's what I would do. The Mummy, which one am I in The Mummy? Who would I be when something like that happens? Would I be the individual that's loading up gold on a camel and gonna get out there? Or would I be the individual that gets by 2 6-shooters and runs, into the cloud? Which one would I be? And I think that's why they're so appealing, not because they may be true or not true, but because we really reflect on ourselves.
Let me rephrase that question then. My question then is, which disaster movie made you think most, like actually tapped more into your anthropology training than, let's say, one that was just like sheer candy?
Any of the zombie movies, biological, contagion, outbreak type movies, because oftentimes the science in those it really varies whether it's good or bad. And there's glimpses of really wonderful science, but there's also this unknown, this fear of something we can't control. Like we know just enough in society about perhaps viruses and biology and DNA, but maybe not enough to understand the science behind it. But again, you have an entire suite of characters, and you'll identify with one or more of those. And those
you'll identify with the medical anthropologist?
I look at those. And I, as a medical anthropologist, especially as we have outbreaks with Ebola and different diseases around the world.
In real life,
I watch the movies and I look at those and I say, wow, what would I do in these sorts of roles? And I look at those and I see them, those perhaps draw me in more if I at least try to get rid of my anthro lens and just enjoy the movie.
Right. So, I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't look at things as much from that lens. But what about you, Dad? A movie that made you think about when you're currently, because you just, went back to school, now you're at San Diego State, what has kind of like gotten all of your anthropology skills as you're watching a movie?
Probably not so much anthropology, but more or less the analytical mind. And that would be a big part of being an anthropologist, to where you measure and you get into the writer's head, you get into the director, and you get into the actors, and they're trying to fulfill the words on the paper. And when you have good writing, it makes it to be a good film, and then it becomes entertaining. There's not that many movies out there that actually are real life, live and true to an anthropologist, to where you got Apocalypto, to where it was a view of the Maya, but there was a lot of drama, docudrama put it into there.
Embellishment.
Exactly.
I'm glad you talked about that. I never saw that, but go ahead.
To where you have to put that aside as an anthropologist, and being a mind is, okay, put that aside and just go with it. And I think that's what you were trying to relay, that you have to just put that aside and say, okay, is this going to entertain me, or am I going to walk out in the middle of the movie?
Yeah, I've never done that yet. Doesn't it show a little window into our society that there are these disaster movies that are these huge things that we as humans are, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We're afraid of these things. We have no control over the big earthquake that's going to come or an asteroid. But in the movie, somehow we have some essence of control. Like we do as a society, as the human race, some of us survive, some of us fix it, right? Isn't there something that says something about us that's part of like almost every disaster movie?
I think so. I think they're speaking about fears that are out there, but also fears at a given time. I think movies are coming out at a specific time. Right. So I don't know. The Mummy is something supernatural that causes or could cause the end of the world. Some individuals open up a casket and there's a curse and so on and so forth. It's the end of the world. 2012 comes along and the world is somehow changed. Environmental issues are in a different perspective. The way that we're interacting with the world around us, the debates happening in society are more about environment, about ecology, about the politics of managing these. So the fear is no longer something supernatural that we've never heard of or perhaps we shouldn't disturb. The fear is now an environmental thing that perhaps outside of the movie theater we should be addressing it. And if we don't, and this is the morality lesson of that movie, if we don't address it, what happens on the screen is going to happen outside of the theater. So,
which plays to, I think, the pseudoscience thing too, right?
I think so. That makes it exciting.
Yeah.
Is the pseudoscience. That's the fun part of the what if.
Yeah, and it's not even a disaster movie, but I think one of the movies that engages the most anthropological thought for me is Interstellar.
Really?
Not to mention that it's one of my favorite movies ever.
Don't listen to one of our shows.
Yes, you tore it apart.
I remember crewing for that one. But,
yeah, okay.
but yeah, that one still it engages my anthropological mind quite a bit because I mean sure, from a physics perspective it may be complete and utter bull.
Yeah,
but
stretching it quite a bit.
But all of the stuff surrounding the human condition, like it's to me it seems like a very tangible end of the world vision.
Right.
It's one of the ones that seems most probable to me, which is what's scary about it, but also like really inspiring in a way.
Yeah. I can see that. It was a very human story. It wasn't really a physics story.
It was very it had the human component everywhere.
Everywhere. And hope, which is what we've decided kind of is basically the disaster movie essence.
It needs
it's
that component.
Hope, right?
Definitely the emotions. There's a lot of different perspectives and emotions that come in, really telling that human experience through a human lens.
Issues too.
Oh, absolutely.
So many.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here, Kyle and Sean and my dad, who's visiting me. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It was an honor.
I love talking about movies.
And badgering you finally came through.
This is his Father's Day present, by the way. All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to Spark Science. This was Science, Pseudoscience, and Society with Western Washington University anthropologist Sean Bruna, Western Washington University student and filmmaker Kyle Mullins, and my father, another anthropology student, Ramon Barber Jr. This show was a collaboration between Western Washington University and KMRE Spark Radio. If you want to learn more, feel free to check out our website at sparksciencenow.com.